Good morning, afternoon, evening or night, whenever you're watching this, welcome. Today I'm filling in liver spaces between places that I've already explored. I wanted to see what the confluence of this river and that little brook up there looked like. Not much, as it turns out. I was kinda hoping for a beach with interesting things to find, but there's locks a short way up the brook that controls the flow for boat navigation, and only a gentle flow of water is being released out. Which means that possibly behind the lock might be a very good place to magnet fish, but that's for another video. In this one I shall wander down the riverbank, wade a bit in places, pick up some of the trash that floodwaters have dropped, along with anything I can reuse, recycle, upcycle, and any old treasures that my little eye can spy. First little find is a bit of clay pipe, which I take ostensibly for craft projects, though I haven't gotten around to doing anything with them yet, probably 18th, 19th century. The second find is a crayfish. I'm fairly certain that it's not the dreaded invasive signal crayfish from the US, which decimates local fish stocks across the UK, but beyond that, I'm not quite sure. Could potentially be a native white-clawed crayfish with unusual colouring. They are sometimes blue, but this one seems to be half brown too. A little pocket of metal things, looks like some rebar, very corroded, and a thick connector wire, which is chock full of copper, a metal that I collect without any desire to scrap it for quick cash. I'm almost ready to fire up my forge for the first time, and I have a few projects in mind for casting copper and brass. This, I think, is the first time I've come across a caterpillar track in the river. Not exactly surprising, this wall borders land occupied by a construction company. Flagentop. Baldwin. Not one I'm familiar with. And somehow, after smashing and tumbling around in the river for so long that the edges are quite smooth, it's still got its cork in it. It's somehow nice that, well, it might not seem like it, but this is actually quite a built-up and populated area, and there's still places where the traffic noise disappears, and there's a little beach by the river without a single footprint on it, until now. Not quite a bracket fungus. Looks about halfway between that and an oyster mushroom. A bit beyond its best, anyway. Seems unlikely as it looks now, but the river here must have been 3 meters higher when it was in flood in February, because that's how high that branch that cloth is hanging from is. And that means that the big flat expanse of land on the other side of the river was about 60 centimeters deep in water. It was a devastating flood, sadly ever more common. Another patch where the river has dropped metal. And not sure what metal this is. It's heavier than I'd expect aluminium. Could be a brass alloy. Wire, of course, I'll take. And other wire. Looks like it was burnt at this end, so unlikely, but just possibly could have come from the former clog factory that burned down a few miles upstream a few months before the February flood. Although, probably not. Part of a telegraph pole array, the bit that keeps the wire away from the pole. Something to do with the mills, I reckon. Probably 200 to 300 years old. Once strong steel cable being slowly eaten by rust. Screen off a mobile phone, a much more advanced one than I have, although mine is still functional. Just a chunky piece of red brass. I'm happy with that. And over here, there are curious shapes. Half a tennis ball, missing the yellow fluff. Plastic cap, much like off a toothpaste tube. And a river-stained piece of stainless steel, maybe from a light fitting. Gah, bit of a dog's chew toy. I shall take it and find it a more fitting place. Sadly, can do nothing about that huge chunk of plastic, the base for a temporary road sign, and part filled with concrete or sand ballast. Waded all the way across the river, and all I found was this bit of blue and white. Willow pattern. Not a bad little piece. There are a few bits of pottery on the riverbed, but I don't suspect there to be a bottle dump being dug or eroded nearby. The concentration isn't high enough. There are still quite a lot of man-made things, mostly bricks. More bricks. Actual intact portions of brick wall. Those kids were curious about what I'm doing and wondered if I've met the pike that supposedly lives in this stretch of river. Pike can grow to 1.5 meters long, though most are about a third of that, and they're pretty shy creatures as carnivores go, with a largely unfounded reputation for attacking people who encroach on their territory. I very much doubt I'll ever see the pike, let alone have to worry about being attacked by one. In the deep water that's currently going over the top of my boots. Part of a flip phone. A nice colour, but not something I'll treasure. The water here is deeper, about 1 metre or more, and closer to the bridge, so here would be optimal for magnet fishing, though not all that picturesque. That shot was cut short by those kids asking about whether it would be safe to jump in and off a bridge for a swim. I'm glad they were sensible enough to ask. I hope they were sensible enough to listen. Manhole cover. Obviously somebody thought that the riverside was a better place for it than, say, covering a big hole in the road. A minor challenge to my optimistic hopes for the state of humanity. My obligatory visual tour of the underside of every bridge I pass beneath, this one with a log jam of flood detritus on the other side, and on this side of pavement that was very much underwater last time I was here, which hopefully means that as I pass downstream into the area I have explored and filmed at before, about a year ago now, there might be more ground exposed and things to find. I think the sandy bit of this beach was underwater, and the more usual river level is just at the edge of the pebbly bit. There's a fair amount of pottery pieces revealed. That's a good piece. Willow pattern, of course, but perfect size for a pendant. Some more blue and white there, though it's nowhere near as vibrant. Another willow pattern piece, not quite as smooth, but I'll take it. Interesting how the sand came this far and now takes a sharp turn back down the bank. It would be fascinating to see the floodwaters, though the currents that did this might have been hidden 3 meters below the surface. That circle in the river I shall investigate, but first I see a partial figurine over here. Wow, I really like that. Probably more as it is broken than I would have liked the intact mass-produced model. I can probably do something crafty with it. Interesting texture, but not for me. A bit of tile. So, this circle. Was not expecting that. Thought it would be a road sign, and instead, I do not know. Let's get it somewhere solid to have a look. Nope, I'm still none the wiser. Any ideas? It is home to quite a few river insects, so back into the water it goes. And since I'm back in the water, may as well have a wade and see. Oh, fish babies. I've only once been able to get into a good enough position amongst fish that didn't immediately swim off to film them well. Next spring I might take my old camera and set it down in the water where the swarms of fry gather by the Big Bottle Beach, and then they'll return to their favoured spot and hopefully be indifferent to the camera while I search for land. A horseshoe. Quite a large one, and trapped in a concretion of rust and pebbles. A lot of the actual iron is gone, tapering away to nothing at the tips, so I doubt I'll take it. But I still enjoyed finding it and imagining what horse it might have come from. Is it big enough, for example, to be from one of the giant Shire horses that pulled the barges along the canals, taking coal and materials to the mills, and then what the mills made to the docks and the markets? Probably not. Their shoes were huge, and this is merely big. I don't have firm expectations of what I'll find when I come out looking, but surgical forceps are quite unexpected. It took me a minute thinking about it to realise the likely origin. I thought about the hospital that's about a mile away and doesn't have a stream running by it. I thought perhaps it had exited the hospital via the sewers and made its way out of the sewage works outflow, which is supposed to be heavily filtered and clean water only. And finally, it occurred to me the simple truth is that it was probably dropped by a fisherman, and was likely the tool used to remove hooks from fish mouths, which in many species of fish, if they're released, leaves scar tissue that can decrease their success in mating. I don't really know why these rocks have been placed like this. There's a field on this side, and though there are mills further downstream, this doesn't look like any mill workings I'm familiar with. Does anyone know? Last time I was here, I was perhaps a bit less reckless when it came to deeper bits of water, and I remember going up onto the field for a fair few of the stretches that today I've attempted to wade. I know the river is a lot lower, but still, younger me was wiser. Oh well. Ooh, even more water in the left boot. But curiously, the water didn't soak as far up my jeans as the right side. On the bright side, looks like this little beach has a bit of potential. Bottom of an old bottle, slightly melted, and the bottom portion of maybe a flagon, maybe a water purifier. A nice nest of copper wire. If I were inclined to scrap it, which I'm not, it would probably be about 50 pence worth. That's about 70 cents US at current prices, so not a huge amount, and collecting all the copper and brass I find in the river is never going to make me rich. But melt it all down into an endless array of artistic smelting projects, those will be a richness of experience that scrapping alone cannot provide. That might be a seal from off the side of a bottle. Quite a rare feature on bottles, maybe only the second one I've found, and some wire. This is not something from the local geology, so the question is, when did it find its way to this little valley? It could possibly have been brought in thousands of years ago for tool making, or someone coming back from a holiday at the seaside with a Rockvale light off the beach. I can't see any percussive marks of flint napping, so I'll leave it. I see a head. Well, this is actually, perhaps surprisingly, a pretty common find for me. I mean this exact model in various sizes, always quite cheap pottery and very broken. I'm not sure who it's supposed to represent. If you know, then please do say. I'm interested to know. Lump of cast iron. Oh, it's a leg with a wheel embedded in there. Not much I could do with it. That looks interesting. Well, interest is entirely subjective, but to me a decorative piece of brass that might have adorned leather, perhaps from clothing or horse tack, is interesting. No holes for nails, so it would have had to have been glued on, which I guess means it's not hugely old, but still nice to find. A bit of thick, flat glass with CES embossed on it. I was a little surprised when I learned that there is a word for the opposite of embossed. It's debossed. I do like words that exist, but aren't often used. Purple. Ha. Wasn't expecting it to be a head, let alone a Japanese style of head. Not a character I recognise, but I'd be the first to admit that my knowledge of manga and anime isn't particularly extensive. Lidophonal teapot. I think today that the railway bridge is my target. I might go a little way beyond, but there's businesses that abut the river, and so if the water gets too deep, there's no easy way around. Looks like a really old style of wrench, made for only one size of bolt. If it wasn't quite such a long way to carry it, I might be inclined to take it. I really do want to try restoring some old metal tools one day, primarily old knives and metal-detected axes, and anything else really has to be very small and easy to store, or something I have a use for. This is neither. My goodness, it's a muddy path to nowhere, and there's at least 2 different sets of footprints. This is about as far as they go, and they don't go back, curiouser and curiouser. Did they go into the water, or into the intractable thicket of Japanese knotweed that's overtaken this banking? That is a question I doubt will be answered, but I do wonder what the other wanderers were doing here. Fishing perhaps, boating, mudlarking. It's not an easy spot to get to. Sadly, looks like there's a deep patch between here and the bridge, so I'm going to have to go back and around. Railway sleeper clip. Genuine and sculptural piece of British railway history, or tiny bit of scrap iron, depending on your viewpoint. Quite a lot of them here anyway. And that fence would be right in my way if I didn't inexplicably appear to be on the side of it that I want to be on. There is another fence that borders the slope up to the railway track, and I don't wish to go up there. But beneath the bridge at the water's edge is my natural habitat, Park Troll. So through the Himalayan balsam which has fought the Japanese knotweed for the prime waterside real estate and lost. On my way out I might gather some of the flowers. They're nice in salads. There's certainly no way it could have fallen from the bridge, so it must have been brought by the river. But I am amazed. It's in wonderful condition, considering how far it must have travelled. I know this type of pottery is stronger than most glass, but even so, an intact blacking pot. Did not expect to find such a thing here. It's quite a pretty bridge, and in this gravel bank that's behind the pier, there's actually quite a lot of pottery sherds, so perhaps there is an old dump site closer than I know of that the blacking pot could have come out of. That warrants a little research when I get home. A bit of pipe stem. And cement. With a goose feather stuck to it and needing a clean, an otherwise nice bit of teal and white. Handled piece of a very large pot. I think probably a garden planter, and fairly modern. Just very soft, poor quality terracotta. A bit of brass or copper, which means there's quite likely some more nearby. Yep, there, bit of copper wire. I like how the river sorts things by specific gravity, makes it so much easier to find things. Looks like a battery pack. Yep, from a radio-controlled car. And I'm not surprised, just a little disappointed. Its proximity to a radio-controlled car track just up the riverbank suggests strongly that it was thrown in from there. I'll take it where it needs to go to get recycled. I had heard from some bottle diggers I met that there might be a dump site down this stretch, and though there was nothing on the old maps, this does seem consistent with that. although no sign whatsoever of bottles yet. I wouldn't say there's no sign of anything interesting. There's plenty of interest for people who like bricks, but if there's anything appealing to me, it's well hidden. Might need to come back in winter time when the greenery has died back. Would be quite nice to paddle down here in a kayak. Maybe one day that'll be a possibility. I think this is the obstacle that stops me today, deep water and a fallen tree in my way. The hillside is solid vegetation with many thorn vines, and I don't fancy traipsing back to the rail bridge, which I am of course going to do to get out of the river, and then carry on around by the road to where I can get back in. Maybe I'll traverse that section on another day, along with the brook that runs up past a supposedly haunted 17th century manor house. Anyway, for now, back the way I've come. I thought I was a bit too tired for searching, but I still managed to spot something I missed under this bridge. It's a humble, uncommon, but nevertheless very welcome vulcanite rubber bottle stopper. Though the finds have been few, this makes it feel like a successful mudlark. Roundup time. That outing was sad in a way for me. I saw how the bank of the river had been massively overtaken by Japanese knotweed, and any time I've reported it, I've been sent to pester another agency, who've passed me on to another, and they pass me back to the first. No one seems to want to take responsibility for it, and I can understand that. It is an absolute pain of a plant to try to eradicate from an area. It's here in my local river to stay. And that unfortunately means that some of the beaches I've been before will be taken over, and exploring there again won't be viable for half a year. I don't mind that too much, because what I really enjoy is exploring new places. But it's probably going to start getting in the way for people who like to lark their local spots. Finds-wise, it wasn't the best of outings, nor the worst. I found a fair amount of blue and white for crafting with, along with 2 pieces that are smooth enough around the edges to consider making pendants with them. The cork from the flagon sadly dropped out when it dried, but I still like the shirt and will probably find somewhere for it to go, maybe a typesetter's drawer display with other relics of local breweries long since gone. The blacking jar is probably a keeper. I do like things like this. The horse's head is probably my favourite find of the day. I do hope I can do something with it that's worthy of it. I found rather more e-waste than I like to find in rivers. They'll go in a box awaiting for when I can next go to the recycling centre, and from there hopefully they'll go on to be recycled. The forceps will be useful in some of the crafts I do. In fact, I have already had occasion to use them a few weeks ago. They were just the right tool for the job. It's always nice to find something useful out in the wild. This little brass thing, it feels machine-made. The pattern is too perfect for handmade, so it's probably 19th or 20th century, and I'd err on the side of it being quite modern. Doesn't mean I'm going to melt it down though. I quite like it, and it might go into some assemblage art thing as it is. The other copper and brass will feed the forge. I'm 1 pair of steel toe-capped shoes and a nice dry day away from having all I need to fire it up for the first time. I'm very much looking forward to it. The thank yous follow the finds, and as ever there's a big thank you for all the kindness that's come my way, the comments, the shares and the likes. A huge thank you to everyone who's donated through Ko-fi. I tried to thank those people individually on the Ko-fi platform, but I'd equally be happy to list their names on screen about here. If that's something that those people would like to see, their name up in lights, do let me know. Individual thanks seems appropriate for the kind people who've bought things off my Amazon wishlist, and there's been a few come in since my last video. So, massive thanks to Kerry Hudlin, who bought this resin kit. I've used a few resin kits in craft projects so far, and this, although quite expensive, is the most reliable I've come across. It gives consistently good results. It will certainly get used in a video or two, so thank you so much, Kerry. Louise Guerin has been incredibly kind with Amazon purchases, and this most recent generosity is no exception. As a year-end non-denominational holiday gift, she bought me a Manfrotto super clamp, which will be used in my increasingly elaborate array of angle poise arms to hold cameras in various elevated positions while I craft. She also bought a package of Das air-drying modelling clay and a 5-pack of Milliput, both of which will appear in craft project videos and will be very useful. Thank you so much, Louise, and I hope whichever year-end holiday you celebrate is a lovely one too. Fellow Riverlarker Michelle Witt, or Whitty, I'm sorry, I don't quite know how to pronounce your surname, wished me a happy holidays and gifted these right-angled clamps, which are going to be very useful indeed. I've already used one of them for filming a video which probably won't be out until Halloween time next year, but was good practice in recording craft working now as I build up to more complicated projects. Thank you so much, Michelle, and I hope your holidays are truly happy. I wish I could say with any confidence who bought this for me to craft with. Super Sculpey is my modelling medium of choice for a lot of projects. The packing slip was ambiguous about who bought it. Might have been Kerry Deeds, or that could be who sold it. If it was Kerry who bought it, then thank you so much, Kerry. And if it was somebody else, then that thank you is for you. Sadly, this modelling wax, which I've already used some of, and this liquid Super Sculpey, which is useful for joining separately sculpted pieces of model together, they arrived without any indication of who kindly bought them. But thank you, sincerely, whoever you are, and if you identify yourself to me, I'll thank you again. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then any way you'd like to show appreciation is very much appreciated. The options are leaving a like, a comment, sharing the video, subscribing. If you subscribe, then hitting the bell icon to get notifications. And the further options, never an obligation, is to buy me a hypothetical coffee through Ko-fi, link in the description, or something off my Amazon wish list. Both of these help propel me faster towards some other videos that I would like to make. This holiday period is one of the loneliest times of the year for a lot of people, so if you know somebody who's alone and you're able to, then please do reach out to them and make them feel like people care about them. I hope that every one of you has a wonderful time this holiday, whichever holiday it is that you celebrate. Thank you all very much for watching, and for now, goodbye.